The massive command bridge of the Imperial Dreadnought Sovereign's will hummed with quiet efficiency. 10,000 crew members worked in perfect synchronization across its mile-long hull, their movements as precise as clockwork. For 3 centuries, the hegemony had ruled the galaxy with an iron fist, and ships like this one were the reason why. Admiral Kethvar stood at the center of it all, his forearms folded behind his back as he gazed out at the star-filled void. The Vorthak were a proud species, tall, elegant, with skin that shimmered like oil on water. They had conquered 47 star systems, enslaved dozens of species, and never once faced a threat they couldn't crush. "Admiral," came a voice from behind him. Communications Officer Zeflin approached, her usual composure cracked by something that looked suspiciously like fear. "We're receiving a transmission from the Terran system." Kethvar's primary eyes narrowed. The Terrans, humans as they called themselves, were a recent addition to the galaxy's catalog of intelligent species. They'd been discovered only 50 years ago, quarantined on a single world in a backwater system. Primitive. Harmless. The hegemony had filed them under future acquisition, low priority. What could those primitives possibly want? "Kethvar?" asked his translator, rendering his words in the common tongue. Zeflin hesitated. "Sir, they're demanding our surrender." A moment of absolute silence fell across the bridge. Then, slowly, a rumble of laughter began. It started with one officer, then another, until the entire command crew was laughing. The idea was absurd. Humans had barely achieved faster-than-light travel. Their ships were crude, their weapons outdated, their understanding of galactic politics non-existent. Surrender? Kethvar wiped moisture from his secondary eyes. To them? Put it on screen. I could use some entertainment. The main display flickered to life, showing a human face. The creature was unremarkable. Pale skin, dark hair, 2 eyes set in a face that looked almost childlike compared to the sophisticated features of the Vorthak. But there was something in those eyes, something that made Kethavar's laughter die in his throat. "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force," the human said, her voice steady and clear. "You have violated our space, enslaved our people, and ignored our warnings. This is your final chance to withdraw from all human-claimed systems and release our citizens." The bridge erupted in fresh laughter, but Admiral Kethvar found himself studying the human's face more carefully. There was no fear there, no desperation, just certainty. "Human," he said, leaning forward in his command throne. "You speak of warnings we have ignored. The hegemony has received no communications from your species." "That's because we weren't talking to you," Admiral Chen replied. "We were talking to your victims. The Kepler colony, the mining stations in the Centauri cluster, the refugee ships you've been hunting. We've been telling them the same thing for weeks now. And what message could you possibly have for them?" The human's lips curved in what Kethvar's xenobiology files identified as a smile. But there was no warmth in it, no humor. It was the expression of a predator showing its teeth. "Help is coming," the transmission cut out. For a moment, the bridge was silent. Then Navigation Officer Yolketh spoke up, his voice uncertain. "Admiral, we're detecting gravitational anomalies at the edge of the system. Multiple contacts emerging from hyperspace." "How many?" Kethvar asked, though he already knew he wouldn't like the answer. "Scanning." "Sir, this can't be right." "How many?" 12,437 contacts and counting. The number hit the bridge like a physical blow. Kethvar felt his throat constrict. The entire hegemony fleet numbered barely 8,000 ships, accumulated over 3 centuries of conquest. The humans had been spacefaring for less than a century. "Impossible," he whispered. "Show me." The main display shifted to show the edge of the system. At first there was nothing but stars. Then, slowly, shapes began to resolve out of the darkness. Ships. Thousands upon thousands of ships. They weren't like anything in the hegemony database. No sleek curves or elegant lines. These vessels looked like they'd been built in a hurry, all angles and exposed framework. Some were clearly converted civilian ships, cargo haulers with weapons bolted to their hulls, passenger liners bristling with missile pods. Others were purpose-built warships, but even these had a crude, utilitarian look that spoke of rapid mass production. But there were so many of them. They filled the display like a swarm of angry insects, their formation loose, but purposeful, and more were arriving every second. "Sir," Tactical Officer Vrenmoth reported, his voice tight with disbelief, "their lead elements are moving into attack formation. They're not following any recognized tactical doctrine." Kethavar stared at the display, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. In all his years of conquest, he'd never faced anything like this. The hegemony's enemies fought with pride, with honor, with carefully planned strategies that could be countered and defeated. But this was something else entirely. "Open a channel," he ordered, "all frequencies." The bridge crew scrambled to comply. Within moments, the main display showed Admiral Chen's face again. But this time, she wasn't alone. Behind her, Kethavar could see what looked like a command center, filled with humans working at control stations, and beyond them, through a massive viewport, he could see the human fleet spreading out like a constellation of death. "Admiral Chen," Kethavar said, trying to keep his voice steady, "you cannot seriously intend to engage the hegemony fleet. We have over 300 ships in this system alone. You may have numbers, but you lack the training, the experience, the ruthlessness," Chen interrupted. "Admiral, you've been reading our files wrong. You think we're some peaceful species that just discovered space travel. You think we're naive, inexperienced, soft." She leaned forward, and Kethavar saw something in her eyes that made his blood run cold. "We've been fighting wars since before we could walk upright. We've turned our entire planet into a weapons laboratory. We've spent the last 50 years watching you enslave and murder our neighbors, and we've been planning, learning, preparing." The display shifted to show tactical data. The human fleet was moving now, not in the neat formations that hegemony doctrine demanded, but in chaotic, unpredictable patterns that made targeting solutions impossible. "Your ships are superior to ours," Chen continued. "Your weapons are more advanced. Your armor is stronger. But you know what you don't have." "What?" Kethavar asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Enough of them." The first wave of human ships reached weapons range and opened fire. The space around the hegemony fleet erupted in light and fury. Thousands of missiles streaked across the void, their exhaust trails painting brilliant lines against the darkness. Energy beams lanced out from the human ships, not the focused, efficient pulses of hegemony weapons, but crude, powerful blasts that looked like they'd been designed to inflict maximum damage, regardless of power consumption. Aboard the Sovereign's Will, Admiral Kethavar watched in horrified fascination as his perfectly ordered battle line began to crumble. The human ships weren't engaging in proper formation combat. Instead, they swarmed around the larger hegemony vessels like predators taking down prey many times their size. "Tactical report," he barked. Vrenmoth's 4 hands flew across his control surfaces, pulling up damage assessments and fleet status reports. "Sir, we're losing ships faster than our computers can track. The humans, they're using sacrificial tactics. They're ramming our vessels." "Ramming?" Kethavar couldn't hide his disbelief. Ramming was the tactic of desperate primitives, not a spacefaring civilization. "Yes, sir. But it's not random. They're targeting our command ships, our carriers, our support vessels. They're trading dozens of their smaller ships to take out our most valuable assets." On the main display, Kethavar watched a cluster of human ships, converted cargo haulers by the look of them, accelerate directly toward the hegemony carrier Endless Dominion. The carrier's point defense systems opened fire, destroying ship after ship, but there were too many. The survivors slammed into the carrier's hull with the force of small asteroids, their crude nuclear reactors detonating in brilliant fireballs. The Endless Dominion, a ship that had terrorized a dozen star systems, broke in half and died in space. "This is madness," Kethavar whispered. "They're throwing away their lives for nothing." "Sir," Communications Officer Zeflin interrupted. "I'm intercepting human communications. They're coordinating these attacks. It's not random at all. Show me. The bridge filled with overlapping voices, humans speaking in rapid, clipped phrases that the universal translator struggled to parse. Wolfpack 7, we have a clear run on the Dreadnought. Initiating attack protocol. Negative, Wolfpack 7. Priority target is the flagship. Repeat, priority target is the flagship. Copy that, Control. Wolfpack 7 redirecting to Sovereign's will. Kethvar felt ice form in his veins. They were targeting his ship specifically. How did they even know which one was the flagship? Evasive maneuvers, he ordered. All speed. The massive dreadnought began to turn, its massive bulk responding, slowly to the helm. But the human ships were already moving to compensate, their formation shifting like a living thing. Admiral? Zephlin said, her voice tight with fear. I'm detecting something else. The humans, they're broadcasting on our emergency frequencies. They're talking to our slaves. What? The cargo haulers, the construction ships, the captured vessels we've been using as support craft. They're receiving instructions from the human fleet. Kethvar stared at her. You mean? Sir, I think we're about to have a mutiny. As if summoned by her words, explosions began to bloom throughout the hegemony fleet. Not the bright, violent detonations of combat, but the dull, contained blasts of sabotage. Cargo ships that had been carrying supplies for the fleet suddenly turned their guns on their escorts. Construction vessels began ramming hegemony warships from behind. Even some of the captured alien crews were turning on their captors. They planned this, Kethvar breathed. The humans. They've been in contact with our slaves all along. They've been organizing them, preparing them. Sir, we need to retreat, Vrenmoth said. We can't fight the human fleet and our own support ships at the same time. But even as he spoke, more human ships were emerging from hyperspace. Not the converted civilian vessels they'd seen before, but purpose-built warships. These looked different, sleeker, more advanced, but still maintaining that crude utilitarian aesthetic that seemed to define human engineering. Admiral Chen, Kethvar said, opening a channel to the human flagship. You cannot hope to hold what you've taken. The hegemony has thousands of ships, millions of soldiers. We will return with overwhelming force. The human admiral's face appeared on screen, and Kethvar was shocked by what he saw. She was smiling. Not the cold, predatory expression from before, but something warm, almost friendly. Admiral, you still don't understand, she said. This isn't an invasion. This is a rescue mission. Rescue? We're not here to conquer your territory. We're here to free your slaves. Every world you've conquered, every species you've enslaved, every life you've crushed under your boot. We're giving them back their freedom. The display shifted to show tactical data from across the system. Human ships were moving toward every hegemony installation, every prison ship, every forced labor camp. But they weren't attacking to destroy, they were attacking to liberate. And once we've freed everyone you've enslaved, Chen continued, we're going to help them build their own fleets, teach them everything we know about fighting tyrants like you. Kethvar felt the blood drain from his face. You're not just fighting us, you're trying to start a revolution. Admiral, the revolution already started. We're just here to make sure it succeeds. A new voice cut into the channel. Not human, but something else. Something that made Kethvar's heart stop beating for a moment. Kethvar of the hegemony, the voice said in perfect Vorthak. This is Commander Thalesh of the Free Kepler Defense Force. You murdered my family. You enslaved my people. You thought we were broken. On the display, Kethvar saw ships he didn't recognize. Sleek, elegant vessels that looked like they'd been built by the Kepler refugees. But they were armed, with human weapons crewed by Kepler warriors, and they were moving with deadly purpose toward the hegemony fleet. You thought wrong, Thalesh continued. We are not broken. We are not defeated. We are free and we are coming for you. The Kepler ships opened fire, their human-designed weapons tearing into the hegemony fleet with surgical precision. But they weren't alone. Other ships were joining them. Vessels crewed by species that Kethvar had thought permanently enslaved. The hegemony's former victims were returning as its executioners. This is impossible, Kethvar whispered. How did you organize all of this? How did you contact so many species without us knowing? Admiral Chen's smile widened. Admiral, you've been making the same mistake that every tyrant in history has made. You assumed that because you controlled the communication networks, you controlled all communication. What do you mean? You never bothered to learn about human history, did you? You never studied how we fought our wars, how we organized our resistance movements, how we kept hope alive in the darkest times. The display showed a new tactical overlay, not ship positions, but communication networks. Lines of connection, spreading across the galaxy like a vast web, linking every enslaved world, every prison ship, every forced labor camp. We didn't need your networks, Chen said. We built our own. Hidden transmitters, coded messages, smuggled equipment. We've been talking to your victims for decades, and they've been talking to each other, building trust, planning, preparing. Kethvar stared at the display, his mind reeling. The scope of what the humans had accomplished was staggering. They'd built a shadow network that spanned the galaxy, organized resistance movements on hundreds of worlds, and coordinated the largest slave uprising in galactic history. But how? He asked. How did you know how to do this? Because we've done it before, Chen replied. Every species you've enslaved, every world you've conquered, we've been there. We've fought these battles. We've made these mistakes. We've learned from them. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was deadly serious. Admiral, the hegemony has ruled for 3 centuries through fear and superior firepower. But you've never faced an enemy that's been preparing for this specific fight for their entire existence. You've never fought a species that's been building weapons and planning wars since before recorded history. The tactical display updated again, showing the full scope of the human fleet. It wasn't just thousands of ships. It was hundreds of thousands. They filled the system like a cloud of locusts, and more were arriving every minute. Every human ship, Chen said. Every human weapon, every human tactic. It was all designed with one goal in mind. To fight an enemy exactly like you. To free people exactly like your slaves. To end tyranny exactly like yours. Kethvar looked around his bridge, seeing the fear in his officers' eyes. They'd never faced anything like this. The hegemony had built its power by conquering divided, isolated worlds. They'd never had to fight a coordinated, galaxy-spanning resistance movement. What do you want? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. We want you to surrender, Chen said. All of you. Every ship, every base, every soldier. Unconditional surrender. And if we refuse? Admiral Chen's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes went very, very cold. Then we'll do what humans do best, she said. We'll fight a war of extinction, and we'll win. The communication channel closed, leaving the bridge of the Sovereign's will in stunned silence. Admiral Kethvar stood frozen, his 4 hands gripping the rail of his command platform so tightly that his knuckles had gone white. Around him, his officers stared at their displays in disbelief, watching as the tactical situation deteriorated by the second. Sir, Navigation Officer Yulketh said, his voice barely above a whisper. We're receiving surrender requests from 17 of our ships. They're asking for permission to stand down. Denied, Kethvar said automatically, then paused. Wait, they're asking for permission? Yes, sir, they're not mutinying, they're requesting formal surrender protocols. This was wrong. Everything about this was wrong. In 3 centuries of conquest, hegemony forces had never requested permission to surrender. They fought to the death, as honor demanded. But now, put me through to Captain Morthek on the Crimson Talon, Kethvar ordered. The display showed the bridge of a heavy cruiser. Its commander, a veteran of dozens of campaigns, but Captain Morthek looked nothing like the proud warrior Kethvar remembered. The Vorthak captain's usually immaculate uniform was torn, his elegant features marred by what looked like claw marks. Captain, report your status, Kethvar ordered. Sir, we've lost primary power and weapon systems, but that's not why I'm requesting permission to surrender. Morthek's voice was strained. Admiral, my crew is asking me to surrender. My own crew. Explain. The humans. They're broadcasting something. Historical data. Information about the hegemony's campaigns, the worlds we've conquered, the species we've enslaved. But it's not just data, sir. It's personal stories. Individual accounts. Kethvar felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of accounts? Sir, they're showing my crew exactly who they've been fighting for. The Kepler children who were separated from their parents. The Altarian miners who were worked to death in our factories. The Centauri artists whose culture we systematically destroyed. The display shifted to show a section of Morthek's bridge, where crew members were gathered around a communication console. They were listening to something. Voices speaking in languages Kethvar didn't recognize, but the emotion was universal. Pain, loss, grief. My weapons officer, Morthek continued, she's been fighting to protect the hegemony for 20 years, but now she's learned that her own weapons killed a school full of children on Kepler Prime. She's asking me how we can continue to fight for a cause that does things like that. Captain, you will maintain discipline and continue the fight. That is an order. Sir, with respect, I'm not sure I can give that order to my crew, and I'm not sure I want to. The channel closed, leaving Kethvar staring at a blank screen. Around him, his bridge crew was silent, but he could feel their eyes on him. Waiting. Watching. Judging. Admiral, Communications Officer Zeflin said quietly. We're receiving similar reports from across the fleet. The humans are broadcasting detailed historical records of every hegemony campaign. They're showing our crews exactly what we've done. Propaganda, Kethvar said, but the word felt hollow even as he spoke it. Sir, these aren't fabricated reports. The humans have documentation, video records, personal testimonies. They've been collecting evidence for decades. On the main display, the tactical situation continued to deteriorate. The human fleet had surrounded the hegemony forces completely, but they weren't pressing their attack. Instead, they were maintaining a loose perimeter, allowing the hegemony ships to see the full scope of what they were facing. They're not trying to destroy us, Kethvar realized. They want us to understand what we're fighting for. Sir, Tactical, Officer Vrenmoth said, I'm detecting something else. The human fleet. They're not just humans anymore. What do you mean? Sir, I'm reading life signs from dozens of different species aboard those ships. Kepler refugees, Altarian survivors, freed Centauri slaves. The humans aren't just fighting for them, they're fighting with them. Kethvar's primary eyes widened. Mixed crews were unheard of in the hegemony. Each species fought in their own ships under their own command structure. The idea of different species working together as equals was impossible, he whispered. Sir, requesting permission to speak freely, Zeflin said. Kethvar nodded, not trusting his voice. Admiral, I've been analyzing the human communications, trying to understand their command structure, and I think we've been looking at this all wrong. How so? We've been assuming that the humans are the leaders of this alliance, that the other species are following their orders, but that's not what I'm seeing in the data. The humans aren't commanding this fleet, they're coordinating it. What's the difference? The difference is that every species in that fleet is fighting for their own reasons, using their own tactics, following their own commanders. The humans are just helping them do it more effectively. Kethvar felt something cold settle in his stomach. You're saying this isn't a human invasion? No, sir, this is a galactic revolution. The humans are just the ones who made it possible. A new voice crackled over the communication system, old, weathered, speaking in accented galactic standard. Admiral Kethvar of the hegemony. This is Commander Veltar of the Altarian Liberation Front. Kethvar's blood ran cold. He knew that name. Veltar had been a resistance leader during the conquest of Altair 7 40 years ago. Kethvar had personally ordered the bombing of the city where Veltar's headquarters was located. The entire command structure of the Altarian resistance had been wiped out. Veltar is dead, Kethvar said. I killed him myself. You killed my body, the voice replied. But you cannot kill an idea. You cannot kill hope. You cannot kill the memory of freedom. The display shifted to show a ship unlike anything in The hegemony database. It was clearly of Altarian design but modified with human technology. Its hull was scarred and patched, showing signs of decades of hard use. For 40 years I have waited for this moment, Veltar continued. For 40 years, my people have lived in chains, forced to mine the metals that build your ships, to grow the food that feeds your armies. But we never forgot. We never gave up. And when the humans came to us with their offer of alliance, we were ready. What offer? Freedom, Veltar said simply. Not freedom given by conquerors, but freedom earned by our own hands. The humans didn't come to save us, Admiral. They came to give us the tools to save ourselves. More voices joined the channel. Kepler commanders, Centauri captains, representatives, from dozens of species that Kethvar had thought broken and scattered. But they weren't broken. They were organized, coordinated, and very, very angry. You see, Admiral Chen's voice cut through the chaos. This is what you never understood about humans. We don't just fight wars to win. We fight wars to make sure they never have to be fought again. And how do you do that? Kethvar asked, though he dreaded the answer. By making sure that every tyrant, every oppressor, every would-be conqueror in the galaxy knows exactly what happens when they try to enslave free people. By making sure that every species in the galaxy has the tools and the knowledge to defend themselves. The tactical display updated again, showing not just the fleet surrounding the hegemony forces, but communication networks spreading across the galaxy. Dozens of star systems were lighting up with activity as resistance movements that had been dormant for decades suddenly came to life. This isn't just about stopping the hegemony, Chen continued. This is about making sure that nothing like the hegemony can ever rise again. We're not here to conquer your empire. We're here to teach everyone else how to stay free. Kethvar looked around his bridge, seeing his officers' faces. The certainty that had sustained them for centuries was gone, replaced by something he'd never seen in Vorthak eyes before. Doubt. Admiral, Cephalin said quietly. I'm receiving reports from across the fleet. 60% of our ships are requesting permission to surrender. The others they're asking for orders. What orders can I give? Kethvar asked, more to himself than to her. How do you fight an enemy that's already won? Sir, Vrenmoth said, his voice careful. The humans are offering terms. Terms? Unconditional surrender in exchange for rehabilitation. Rehabilitation? Admiral Chen appeared on the main display again, her expression serious but not unkind. Admiral Kethvar, we're not here to exterminate you. We're here to stop you. There's a difference. What kind of difference? The kind that means your people get to choose their own future. The hegemony as a political entity will cease to exist. Your military will be disbanded. Your conquered territories will be returned to their rightful owners. But your species, your culture, your right to exist, that's not something we want to take away. And if we refuse? Chen's expression hardened. Then we'll do what we have to do to protect the innocent people you're holding captive. But I hope it doesn't come to that. Kethvar stood silent for a long moment, staring out at the vast human fleet that surrounded his forces. 3 centuries of hegemony power, 3 centuries of unquestioned dominance, and it had all come to this. Surrounded by the very people they'd enslaved. Outgunned by a species they dismissed as primitive and facing a choice that would determine the fate of his entire civilization. I need time to consider, he said finally. You have 1 hour, Chen replied. Then we start liberating your prison ships whether you cooperate or not. The channel closed, leaving Kethvar alone with his thoughts and the weight of galactic history pressing down on his shoulders. The hour passed like a lifetime. Admiral Kethvar stood in his private quarters aboard the Sovereign's Will, staring out at the stars through the reinforced viewport. Somewhere out there, thousands of human ships waited in the darkness, their crews patient and ready. Behind them, the liberated fleets of a dozen enslaved species held their positions, no longer victims but victors in waiting. A soft chime indicated that someone was requesting entry. Come, Kethvar said, not turning from the viewport. Communications. Officer Cephalin entered, her usual composed demeanor replaced by something Kethavar had never seen before: uncertainty. "Admiral, the hour is almost up. The human fleet is beginning to move into position around our prison ships." "Have you come to advise me to surrender?" Kethavar asked. "Sir, I've come to tell you what my analysis of the situation has revealed." Kethavar finally turned to face her. "And what is that?" "The humans aren't bluffing. They have the capability to destroy every ship in our fleet within minutes if they choose to. But more importantly, they have something else." "Which is?" "They have the moral authority to do it." Kethavar's secondary eyes narrowed. "Explain." "Sir, I've been monitoring communications across the galaxy. The humans have been broadcasting everything. The evidence of our campaigns, the testimonies of our victims, the documentation of our crimes, and the response has been unanimous." "Unanimous?" "Every neutral species, every trade federation, every political entity in the galaxy is supporting the human action. They're calling it a liberation, not an invasion. The humans have managed to do something that no one in galactic history has ever done before." "What?" "They've united the entire galaxy against us." Kethavar sank into his chair, the weight of the revelation settling on his shoulders. "How is that possible?" "Because they were right, sir. Everything they've said about us, everything they've accused us of, it's all true, and everyone knows it." A soft alert chimed on Kethavar's personal communicator. "Sir," came the voice of his aide, "the human admiral is requesting to speak with you. Priority channel. Put her through." Admiral Chen's face appeared on the wall display, her expression serious but not hostile. "Admiral Kethavar, your hour is up. I need your decision." "Admiral Chen," Kethavar said, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his mind. "I have a question. For you. Go ahead. If I surrender, if I order the entire hegemony fleet to stand down, what happens to my people? What happens to the Vorthak?" Chen's expression softened slightly. "That depends on what you mean by your people, Admiral. The civilians, the non-combatants, the Vorthak who had nothing to do with the hegemony's campaigns. They'll be free to build whatever kind of society they want, as long as it doesn't involve enslaving other species. The Vorthak homeworld and your original colonies will remain under your control. We have no interest in conquest." "And the military? The soldiers? Who followed orders? Those who committed war crimes will face justice. Those who were simply following orders will have the opportunity to rebuild their lives. But the hegemony as a military force will cease to exist." Kethavar nodded slowly. "And if I refuse to surrender? Then we'll fight. And we'll win. But a lot more people will die on both sides. Admiral Chen, may I ask you something?" "Of course, why offer us terms at all? You clearly have the power to simply destroy us. Why give us the choice?" Chen was quiet for a moment, her expression thoughtful. "Admiral, there's something about humans that I think you still don't understand. We don't fight wars because we love violence. We fight wars because we love peace. And peace built on the foundation of justice lasts longer than peace built on the foundation of fear." "What do you mean?" "If we simply destroyed your fleet, killed your leaders and scattered your people, what would that accomplish? Revenge? Maybe. But it wouldn't create lasting peace. There would always be survivors plotting to return, always be new tyrants rising to take your place." The display shifted to show a split screen. On one side, Kethavar could see the human fleet, weapons powered down but ready. On the other side, he could see the prison ships of the hegemony, their holds filled with enslaved beings from dozens of species. "But if we can convince you to choose peace," Chen continued, "if we can show you that there's a better way to live than through conquest and domination, then maybe we can build something that will last. You're asking me to betray everything I've spent my life fighting for. No, Admiral, I'm asking you to choose what's more important, your pride or your people's future." Kethavar stared at the display, his mind racing. Everything he'd believed in, everything he'd dedicated his life to, was crumbling around him. The hegemony had been his world, his identity, his purpose. Without it, what was he? Admiral, Zeppelin said quietly. There's something else you should know? What? I've been monitoring internal communications. The other hegemony fleets they're asking for orders, but they're also asking for permission to negotiate their own surrenders. Kethvar's heart skipped a beat. How many fleets? All of them, sir. The humans didn't just target this system. They've coordinated simultaneous actions across the entire hegemony. Every major fleet, every important base, every strategic installation, they're all surrounded by liberation forces. This entire conversation, Kethvar realized, is being repeated across the galaxy. Yes, sir. And Admiral, the reports are coming in. The hegemony fleet at Altair has already surrendered. The forces at Kepler Prime have stood down. The garrison at Centauri Station has been evacuated. Kethvar felt the last pillars of his world crumble. It's over. Sir? The hegemony. It's over. Even if I order this fleet to fight to the death, it won't matter. The war is already lost. Admiral Chen's voice drew his attention back to the display. Admiral, I understand this is difficult. You're being asked to make a choice that goes against everything you've been taught to believe. But I want you to know that surrender doesn't mean the end of the Vorthak people. It means the beginning of a new chapter. What kind of chapter? That's